Welcome back. Now, in Nigeria, the Senate has just passed an amendment to the Criminal Code prescribing life imprisonment as the punishment for anyone convicted of child defilement. And this comes, with the increasing rate of sexual violence against minors and other related cases. So now we're looking at the imperativeness of life imprisonment as punishment for child molesters. We have in the studio Ogochukwu Onuoha. He's a human rights crusader. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I greet to our viewers.
Now, what do you think about this idea of life imprisonment for child molesters? When you heard this amendment, what came to mind?
Well, for me, it was a welcome development, and still a welcome development. I mean, no punishment can be too much for an adult person who decides to expose a child to sexual activity when the child is not old enough for such an activity. But come to think of it, the other side of it is that we in Nigeria and to a large extent in sub-Saharan Africa, we have parliaments that are very good at making laws of international standards, but which we are unable to implement. So issues involving illicit sexual activities such as rape and the rest of them have been provided for enough in our laws, but the problem is usually the clauses in the law that provide for evidence. Very often, because the evidence is usually lacking by the time the prosecution drags the accused to court. So most victims of illicit sexual activities often decide that the best thing is to slip over their rights rather than trying to enforce it because of the technicalities involved in enforcing such rights.
Well, why is it crucial for Nigeria to adopt such stricter punishment for the people that has committed these offenses at a time like this?
Good. Why it is necessary, why it is imperative that Nigeria does something about it, is to begin with the fact that even though women often suffer rape outside their homes, most of the times pedophilia, that is illicit sexual knowledge of a child, often occurs within the family among people whom the child is very familiar with. Uncles, cousins, brothers, name them. People whom the child can trust and whom the child will not be able to lodge a complaint against. These are often the perpetrators. And for a law like this to be passed, for me, I think it's a positive development, provided it goes a long way towards dragging such criminals to court. That is, if family members who often want to protect the image of the family and the child will allow such prosecution to occur.
Now, from what you've said, the main issue here is implementation, not just having these laws. So what does that then say about our legislature and our judiciary if we have these laws in place but people are worried about the implementation process?
The problem is not really that of the judiciary or any other one person. It's a societal problem. The fact is that we live in a capitalist society where your social status is measured according to the amount of wealth one has accumulated. For many years, I served as a human rights volunteer with HRVC, and then I frequently went to courts and at other times went to police station to make sure that accused persons were granted bail gratis, which is what is provided by the law. I discovered that for a magistrate or the panel of jurists handling a trial in the law court, for them to take a decision on an issue, they'll have to find out who is involved. Are there some highly placed Nigerians who are involved, who might be offended by any verdict the court reaches? If there are such people involved, the victim will not usually get justice. So that is, to me, the paramount issue. That we live in a country where the legislature can make just laws and the problem becomes the implementation. Because the major issue uppermost in the minds of Nigerians is who is involved. You do not obtain justice in Nigeria if you are not a highly placed person. If a crime is committed against an individual and we see the police running around to track down the criminals, usually someone highly placed is involved. An ordinary person will not get such attention.
All right. Now, what would you say is the biggest barriers that actually prevent victims from seeking justice in Nigeria?
The biggest barrier, from my point of view, is lack of civil rights education. Good. There is this tendency for many Nigerians to say, oh, this is a fait accompli. In French, we say fait accompli. I mean, it has happened. Nothing can be done about it. Who can fight for me? Many Nigerians really do not understand that there are agencies here and there who can help if you bring up this kind of case. There are not many of them, but I know some that have worked as a volunteer for some human rights organization here in Enugu. And we have handled issues because we have pro bono lawyers. That is, lawyers who are ready to render their service free of charge, so long as it is proven that the victim is indigent and cannot finance his own lawsuit personally. So we need to increase public education, tell Nigerians that no, you don't have to sleep over your rights. You need to talk to somebody, talk to one person, talk to a second person, talk to a third person. By the time you get to the fourth or fifth person, you will see somebody who will tell you, oh, I've heard about a place where you can obtain help if you have this kind of a problem.
Now, you said earlier that we live in a capitalist society where, you know, people are it's based on what you have or how much money you have, and you also made mention of people in higher positions being part of this issue. So now, what can be done? Do you think there is any solution to this problem, or is this just a situation where we have this we focus on punishment, but we don't do anything to fix the system that has failed the victim? What do you think can be done in this situation?
One way to fix the challenges that we face in implementing laws in Nigeria is through public education in schools, and then through mass mobilization and public enlightenment programs like the one that Signature TV is doing now. When first and foremost, Nigerians need to know their rights, and Nigerians need to begin to see themselves as one. I'm talking about the masses of Nigerians, that the masses of Nigerians versus the elite, because the elite has everything to gain from the lopsided judicial system that we have in the country. And then we need to try to solve the problem of ethnicity and tribalism, because in Nigeria, if a politician commits an offense, the question is usually, where does he come from? If the politician is Igbo, those of us who are Igbo do not think he has done anything wrong. After all, he's our own man. If the politician is Fulani or Hausa, people of northern Nigerian origin, we think, he's our man. After all, if people from the other side, somebody from the other side does it, nobody will do anything. That is the way Nigerians behave. It is the major reason why elections are often rigged, not by political parties, but by the people themselves. The question is, he's from our side, therefore we must do everything to let him be there. Even if the politicians goes there and end up delivering nothing to the people, no one ever takes it into consideration. Once it is known that the governor is from my side of the state, it is okay, whatever he does, and then I'll be ready to fight anyone who makes any statement negative against him.
All right. Now you said that legislation is part of the problems that Nigerians are facing, and many laws in Nigeria are strong on paper, but then weak in implementation, like you said. What do you think? What are the practical steps you think that organizations, civil society, the molested can actually take to see that these bills are actually implemented?
Now, the wealthy in society, the elite in general, would not like the laws to be implemented. Very often, they are the culprits. They want to have their way at all costs, at the expense of the ordinary people. Now, what we can do, like I said earlier on, is through public education and then through empowering the human rights organizations. These human rights organizations are individually owned. They are not empowered by the government and are not supported financially by the government. If more Nigerians identify and become members of human rights organizations, not just hearing about them. For instance, in one of the organizations that I worked with before, lectures were given every Tuesday afternoon, and ordinary people who are not lawyers or police officers, are taught to go to court and defend themselves instead of seeking a legal representation by an attorney if they have a case in the law court. And we send ordinary people like traders from the Obeti main market to go to a police station and ensure that an accused person is granted bail free of charge in accordance with the provision of the law. If many Nigerians are empowered to do so to protect their rights, I think we will have gone halfway towards solving the problem, because the elite cannot do it for us. The elite violate the law to their own advantage, and they will oppose anybody who tries to stop them, and they have the power.
All right, sorry, Uche, before you continue. Now, you're saying that we need empowerment. How about in a case where this impunity happens in a rural area? What do you expect the people in the rural area, or the molested, or the family of the molested, what do you think they should do? How do they go about this?
In the past, we had visited a number of villages in Enugu and in Ebonyi State and in Imo and Anambra to educate the villagers, to tell them these are the provisions of the law, and then this is what you are to do. For instance, we told a number of villagers that in Nigeria, marriages can be contracted either on the basis of the Marriage Act or on the basis of the customary law. That marriages that can be divorced or that can be dissolved in a law court in Nigeria are those that are contracted under the Marriage Act, and that the ones that cannot be dissolved are the ones contracted under the custom. And so if you want the law to protect marriage, after the usual traditional wedding, you need to go to the local government registry and get your marriage registered and get an official marriage certificate issued by the federal government of Nigeria. By so doing, if there are complications in a marriage as it is going on, you have the legal standing, what we call local standing, to approach a law court and say, for this and that reason, I want this marriage contracted by the law to be dissolved, possibly for the safety of those who have contracted the marriage. So we in human rights organizations have not left the rural areas uncovered. We do organize campaigns to rural areas once in a while, where we educate the people about the provisions of the law. For instance, I have been particularly outspoken about inheritance rights in our customary laws. Section 42 of the Nigerian Constitution provide against all forms of discrimination based on gender, religion, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. And by the provision of that section of the law, it is against the law in Nigeria for members of the Omuna or kindred to say, because you're a girl child, custom prevents you from inheriting from your father. No, it is against the law. Yes, our customary laws are valid, but our constitution says that any other law in the country is null and void to the extent to which it disagrees with the constitution. The customary law is valid so long as it doesn't go against the constitution. But then when fathers give birth to boys and girls and they all perform their duties in the house as children, and then later on in their lives the father passes on and the boys decides that because they are the boys, the girls who are their sisters have no right to inherit from their father's property. I have often spoken against it because it is a contradiction of our law, and also against human justice.
Okay, Mr. Onwoha. Now we're just back to the issue of child molesting so that we don't digress so much. You made mention earlier of meeting people, those who are victims, meeting people to, you know, talk, and hopefully they get help from one person. But then there is this issue of stigma that is usually attached to people who have been molested in one way or the other. So how can we break this culture of silence, because it makes them go silent, they don't talk, they don't speak up, and so they don't get help. So how do we break this culture of silence that protects the abusers? How do we, especially in churches, schools, and traditional communities?
Of course, I guess you're already aware that judicial proceedings in the country are not covered under camera. Do you understand that? And then very often arrangements can be made so that the victim of rape, for instance, or child abuse could stay out of court while her legal representative, as her counsel, appears in court to defend her. And if there are details needed from her, very often this can be done by phone. But there are also cases where the victim would prefer to appear in court in person. From my point of view, there is nothing like stigma. It depends on the way one interprets it. We all pass through problems and overcome them. If a girl child, for instance, has endured rape and overcome it and is able to obtain justice in a law court, we should regard her as a heroine and not as someone to be trodden upon. That is the way I see it. It is not one of the greatest problems that people face in the world. People also face other humiliating circumstances and overcome them and still get reintegrated into the society.
Yes, people don't understand it the way that you do, and so people that have been abused are silent. So I'm asking you, what can we do, especially in churches, because these are places where people experience this stigma that you just spoke about. Yes. Churches, schools, and their traditional community. So what can be done to erase the mindset of stigma and help people that have been molested speak up more?
All right, community enlightenment programs can be organized, and of course in churches and in the human rights organizations where I had worked in the past, there is an alternative to dispute resolution, where we have the service of a psychologist who help to rehabilitate those who have been traumatized by this kind of experiences, where counseling is given to them to help them gradually to overcome the situation and realize that it is just one of the many problems that people face on earth, and that if others have been overcoming theirs, they should do the same. And as for members of the public, you know who we are. We like talking, and people are quite cynical in their ways. It will be difficult to stop people from talking, but what we usually advise members of the public is to take cognizance of the fact that a problem that has befallen A today can also be a lot of B or C tomorrow, and so nobody should look down on somebody who is just recovering from a traumatic situation and begin to talk about that person as if he has committed the greatest crime on earth.
All right. Now, what do you say about rehabilitation and reformation? Do you actually believe that imprisonment is enough, or do you think that Nigeria can adopt, maybe a multidimensional approach towards this, not just for the victim but also for the offender?
Imprisonment is to be eulogized. One is that it gives the offender a period of isolation from the society, where he is provided an opportunity to be contrite, to begin to say, how could I do this? And it is what I have done that has brought me to this point. Now, it is a cheery idea that in Nigeria we no longer use the term prison when I talk about correctional centers. And I understand that nowadays Nigerians in correction facilities have the opportunity to go to school. Those of them who didn't have a degree before are doing distance education and studying. And then we have clergymen who visit the correctional centers frequently to give the moral aspect of education to these people, so that by the time their prison terms are served, they will be thoroughly rehabilitated, so that once more they'll be reintegrated into society. And I have listened to radio programs telling Nigerians to please welcome those who have served prison terms as members of the society. They have suffered for the crime they committed, they have repented and should be worthy members of the society again, so that they will be allowed to employ that same force they used previously to commit crimes to the service of the community more positively.
Now, some people argue that this idea of life imprisonment may violate some human rights rules, or principles of human rights and proportionality. So I'm just wondering, do you see this law as something that aligns with human rights, or do you think that it can be used dangerously if the justice process is flawed?
Sometimes abuses do occur. What I want to point out is this: no rights are absolute, not even the right to life. There are always exceptions. For instance, the right to life permits all of us as human beings to live. No one has the right to take another's life. But there is also a proviso that if someone commits an offense against the state, and by the ruling of a law court, the person could be put to death. You see that? So, of course, confinement in a correctional facility is usually an infringement of somebody's right to personal liberty or freedom of movement. Good. But these rights are suspended only for a time, and the law provides for it to allow the person serve a prison term because of the offense he or she has committed. So I think it is just, it is something that should be encouraged as a way of deterring more people from engaging in criminal activities.
All right. Now, before we go, how do we detect early child abuse? Because there are some teenagers or children who, lack the courage to speak up. How do we detect that? And what can we say to teachers, to parents, community leaders, religious leaders going forward?
All right. Parents have an enormous role to play in this direction, especially the mother at home. The mother is supposed to start very early to tell the children, see, you are masculine in gender, you are to associate with people of your own gender, and the girl child, you are feminine in gender. Please, let nobody call you my wife. Always tell anybody who says, my wife, say I am not old enough to be anybody's wife, and my mother doesn't like that term. So you teach your children to be bold. Do not allow anybody to carry you on his lap, your uncles, your male cousins, and so on and so forth, other relations. Mothers should start educating the girl child very early on this. And it is not just the education, the mother should also be allowed in a family where there is a large number of people. The woman should be allowed, she should know who is with a particular child at a particular time, especially those children who are still too young to be able to say no to somebody's approach. So I think mothers have a lot to do in this direction, and alongside the other members of the family, the daughters who are grown up, and the sons, they should all play a role in this direction.
All right. Thank you very much, Ugochukwu Onoha. Thank you so much for joining us on Signature Money. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Now, we just spoke to a human rights advocate on imperative of life imprisonment for